Another strategy that you can use to subtract mixed numbers when we don't have enough in that fractional part, in that first fraction, is to just use improper fractions to do that subtraction. We're still going to show it by stacking them to keep that consistent, and we always need common denominators. That doesn't change as long as we are adding and subtracting fractions. So because we are subtracting, we need common denominators, super important. But this time, after getting those common denominators, if we don't have enough, or even if we do, we're going to rewrite them as improper fractions to subtract. So let's do that for the first one. We have 3 2/5 minus 1 4/5. We already have common denominators, so we are going to rewrite them as improper fractions using our boom boom strategy. Bottom times the side gives us 15, plus 2 is 17, so this is 17/5, minus bottom times the side is 5, plus 4 is 9, 9/5. Notice how the denominators always stayed the same. Now we can subtract 17 minus 9, which is 8/5, and you'll notice right now that it is top heavy. That is very, very common when we are using the strategy of improper fractions. So simplifying is also always super important. In this case, we need to divide 8 by 5. 5 goes into 8 one full time, so we know our whole number will be 1. 1 times 5 is 5, with 3 left over. So this 8/5 will become 1 3/5. Let's try that for the next one. Stacking them, 4 2/7 minus 2 1/2. We need common denominators, so that's our second step. A great common denominator is going to be 14 between these two, because 7 times 2 is 14. We had to multiply the 7 times 2, so we do that in the numerator and denominator, giving us 4 4/14. The whole number stayed the same. 2 would have to be multiplied by 7. Once we have them written, we notice that we can't subtract, we don't have enough, then we need to write them as improper fractions. 14 multiplied by 4, this is where, when we have bigger denominators, this strategy isn't as friendly. We can always use the other strategy, or we can keep using this one and just show our work off to the side, and that's perfectly fine. So if we do 14 times 4, 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1, giving us 56. So 14 times 4 was 56, plus 4 more is 60, still out of the same denominator. 14 times 2 is 28. 28 plus 7 gives us 35. So now we have 35/14, and then we can subtract. 60 minus 35 is going to give us 25/14. Again, you'll notice that it's top heavy, so we have to simplify using division. 25 divided by 14, 14 only goes into 25 one time. When we subtract the 14, we have 11 left over, so it's 1 and 11 left over out of the 14. Check to see if we can simplify any farther, which in this case we can't, and that would be our answer. Use the same process for this next one. 6 1/6 minus 1 2/3, stacking them, then getting common denominators. 6 can be a great common denominator for this one. However, we could use a bigger denominator, but the bigger the denominator, the harder it's going to be when creating improper fractions, because that's big multiplication. So if we keep it at 6, because 3 times 2 is 6, that's going to be the easiest. So we have 1 and 4/6. So now at this point when we subtract, we don't have enough, but we do have common denominators, so we're going to write them as improper fractions. Bottom times the side is 36, at the top is 37/6 minus 1 times 6 is 6 plus 4 is 10. So we have 10/6. Then when we subtract, 37 minus 10 is 27/6. Again, always having to divide with the strategy. So if you are not a huge fan of dividing, you probably want to practice that process and also work on the borrowing strategy in the previous video. When we do 27 divided by 6, 6 goes into 27 4 times, giving us 24. 3 left over. It went in 4 full times, so 4 is our whole number. 3 is what was left over, so it's 3 out of 6. Always check to see if you can simplify, because in this case we can divide them both by 3, which is 4 and 1/2 as our final answer. Let's do this bottom middle problem this time. Starting by stacking them 3 and 3/5 minus 2 and 5/7. We need common denominators. 5 times 7 gives us 35 as a common denominator. So we'd have to multiply that by 7. Whole number always stays the same. Match that in the numerator, giving us 21. You'll notice that some of these numbers are already getting fairly big. 7 would have to be multiplied by 5 to get 35, which gives us 25 for a numerator. We don't have enough to subtract. 21 is not big enough, so we have to use our next step of creating improper fractions. And this is where it gets a little tricky, and showing your work will be important. Bottom times the side, that's going to be 35 times 3, which gives us 15, and 10, which is 105, but then we have to add 21 to it, because that's our numerator, giving us 126 35ths minus the next one. This time we have to take 35 and multiply it by 2, which gives us 10 and 7, but then add the numerator, giving us 95, which is 95 35ths. Now we have our improper fractions that we can subtract. So what we do is show that step as well. 126 minus 95. 6 minus 5, we have enough. 2 minus 9, we don't, so we would have to borrow. So really it's going to be 12 minus 9, which is 3. So we have 31 out of the 35. Always checking to see if you can simplify. 31 is prime and cannot be multiplied into 35. Another way we can check is by saying, does 2 work? Odd numbers, no, 2 doesn't work. 3 times 10 is 30. 3 times 11 is 33, and that didn't work for 31. It wouldn't work for 35. 4 doesn't work for either number. 5 only works for the bottom number, not for 31. 6 also doesn't work. And we've already checked all of the numbers lower than this. 6 multiplied by itself would give us 36, which is higher than both. So it cannot be simplified. To review those steps, we want to stack them first to create a common denominator. Rewrite them as improper fractions using our boom boom strategy, bottom times the side, add the top. And then we're going to subtract our numerators before finally simplifying at the very end to get your final answer. Be super careful with your calculations, especially when you're working with bigger numbers like we were.